All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into one of the shortest chapters in the entire Quran, Surah Al-Kafiroon. Now, it's only a few lines long, but don't let that fool you. It packs an incredibly powerful lesson on identity and coexistence, a lesson that's just as relevant today as it was 1400 years ago.
But before we get into the history, I want to start with a question for you. Just think about it for a second. In your own life, your job, your relationships, your personal beliefs, where do you draw the line? At what point does being flexible cross over into compromising who you really are? It's a tough question, and it's something we all wrestle with. Well, for the very first Muslims back in 7th century Mecca, this wasn't some abstract thought experiment. Answering that question, where to draw the line, was a matter of survival. It was about their identity, their community, the very foundation of their faith. Everything was on the line. So, to really feel the weight of this chapter, you've got to understand the incredible pressure this small group was under. We're not talking about a friendly debate here. This was a high-stakes standoff, and it all led up to what seemed like a reasonable offer, but was anything but. Okay, so the leadership of Mecca at the time, the Quraysh, they launched this massive pressure campaign. Socially, the Muslims were constantly mocked. You could say they were trolled, accused of dividing the community. And economically, they were threatened with boycotts, basically financial ruin and total isolation. It was in this incredibly hostile environment that the Quraysh leaders came forward with what they called a compromise. So here's the deal they proposed. It was pretty straightforward. Let's just merge our religions. How about this? For 1 year, we'll all worship your God. Then, the next year, you worship our gods. Now, on the surface, that might sound like a reasonable path to peace, right? But Prophet Muhammad saw it for what it was. This wasn't a compromise, it was a trap, designed to completely water down and dissolve the core of his message. So in response to this incredibly high-pressure offer, the answer didn't come from some backroom political deal. Nope, it came directly as a divine revelation. A clear, firm, and absolutely final declaration that was going to settle this whole issue once and for all. And the chapter kicks off with this incredibly direct command. Say. I mean, that's not a suggestion, right? It's a command to make a public declaration. And right away, it draws a line in the sand. It establishes a fundamental difference in what is being worshipped. And then the verse immediately mirrors that statement. It basically says, just as I don't worship what you don't worship what I worship. It's this powerful mutual distinction, a clear two-way boundaries being set. But then it gets repeated, and this is so important. There's a crucial shift here. This isn't just for poetic effect. This repetition is a declaration about the future. It makes the refusal absolute, stretching it across time. It's saying, I don't worship your gods now, and I never will. And again, it's mirrored for the future tense. So this structure, this really deliberate repetition, it's like it's building a fortress of words. The point is made, it's mirrored, and then it's projected into the future, sealing off any possible misunderstanding from every single angle. It is a complete 360-degree rejection. When it comes to the act of worship, the message is clear. There is absolutely no middle ground. And the chapter wraps up with this incredibly powerful line. And listen to the tone here. It's not hostile. It's a statement of separation. For you is your way of life, and for me is mine. It's basically a declaration of religious independence. It says, hey, our paths are different and they can exist side by side, but they won't be merged. Okay, so that's what the response was, a firm, absolute refusal. But to really get it, to understand its deep significance, we need to dig into why. Why was this compromise so completely impossible from an Islamic point of view? Well, the key lies in that final verse, specifically in the Arabic word deen. Now, it often gets translated simply as religion, but deen is so much bigger than that. It refers to an entire comprehensive way of life, a complete system of belief, law, morality, the whole shebang. So the separation wasn't just about rituals. We're talking about two fundamentally different operating systems for how to live. And I want to stress this again. The rejection, this no, it wasn't rude or angry. It wasn't emotional at all. It was a calm, dignified, but totally firm no. And it wasn't coming from a place of aggression, but from a place of unshakable principle. So what is that unshakable principle? Well, it's a concept called tawheed, the absolute, uncompromising oneness of God. In the Muslim worldview, this isn't just some dusty old dogma, it's a deep conviction about the very nature of reality. It's the bedrock, the foundation upon which everything else, justice, fairness, compassion, is built. And you can't negotiate or water down a truth that fundamental. That is the bottom line, period. Okay, so this raises a really important question, right? If you draw such a firm line, does that mean you have to build walls and isolate yourself? That's a common misunderstanding. People think this leads to isolation, but what this chapter teaches is actually the complete opposite. See, the Surah draws a very specific and very clear line. The boundary it sets is purely theological. It's all about your core beliefs about God and the specific acts of worship that come from those beliefs. That's the part that's distinct and totally non-negotiable. But what this separation does not mean is absolutely crucial to understand. This is not a call for social isolation. It doesn't mean you can't live with, work with, or be great friends and neighbors with people from other faiths. Not at all. In fact, the Prophet himself made civic agreements and pacts with non-Muslims. So in a way, this chapter gives us a blueprint for real multiculturalism, the ability to have deep social and civic integration, while at the same time preserving your core spiritual identity. All right, so let's bring this all home. How does this 1,400-year-old lesson about drawing boundaries apply to us today, with all the pressures we face in our modern world? Well, this lesson shows us there are basically 3 ways to react when our core beliefs are challenged. First, there's the apologetic route. You kind of water down your principles just to fit in and get social acceptance. Then there's the defiant way. You get defensive, you point fingers back and yell, "So what? You do it too." But Islam teaches a third way, the just way. And that is to stand firmly for your principles, with confidence and decency, no matter what the social pressure is. This chapter also forces us to make a really important distinction between identity and culture. Your true spiritual identity isn't about the clothes you wear or the food you eat. That's culture, and Islam is totally open to all kinds of cultural diversity. The identity that this surah is all about protecting is built on those core foundational values, things like truthfulness, justice, and compassion. So really, the ultimate takeaway from this powerful little chapter is a lesson in self-worth. It's about dignity. It's a reminder to not give in to that fear, the fear of being labeled or misunderstood or losing some social status just for holding on to what you believe in. It teaches you to know your own boundaries and to stand your ground, calmly, clearly, and without feeling like you have to apologize for it. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? In our world today, which is so interconnected, the lesson from this surah is maybe more important than ever. It really challenges all of us to ask, how do we build real bridges of understanding and cooperation with people who are different from us, without erasing the very boundaries and principles that make us who we are? It seems the answer might just lie in this idea of coexistence without compromise.